In my mother tongue Bangla, Golpo is a curious word. It means story, a noun, and it also means conversation, the verb. I have grown up to the wonderful sound of Golpo, stories and conversations that have shaped me to be the storyteller that I am today. In this brand new season of Golpo, Stories from Around the World, me, your storyteller Rituparna, will continue to bring you stories that have picked me. Yes, stories pick me. They really ask me to tell them. They poke, punch, provoke, and push me to tell them. But before they do all of that, they speak to me, lighting up my mind and my heart in ways that only a very special story can do. And in this podcast, I bring to you some of those special stories. These are just some of my stories, handpicked and tucked in my story bag so I can tell them to you when the time is right. Are these stories for children or adults? Well, they are for anyone who has a heart beating for stories. And I really hope that this podcast helps you discover that inside you. Play this on your way to work, to put your child to sleep, to create a moment together as a family, to share an idea with your team, find a dose of inspiration, creativity, or a fresh perspective perhaps. Let these stories be your companion when you want some quality time with yourself. Like I said, you will hear a story today, and I hope it stays with you and lights up your heart and mind like the way these stories do for me. Hello and welcome back to Golpo Stories from Around the World. Let me begin by saying that I'm very, very, very grateful to all the people who welcomed this podcast back into their lives. I know I have not been consistent. I know I have been absent for a while. I know you had to perhaps listen and re-listen to the same story again, not knowing when the new story would drop. And yet, you kept coming back to this podcast. So, all of you who have been listening to Golpo Stories from Around the World, and to all the new listeners who discovered this podcast in the last 1 week, a big, big, big thank you to you. I am so, so grateful. And I promise that come hail, come sunshine, I am not going back from this podcast ever again. Well, the stories have been hounding me, they have been poking and provoking me to go and find a place to tell them. But one of the most important reasons why I resurrected or restarted and relaunched this podcast is because as a storyteller, I realize that, when I go to perform, when I go to tell a story, when I go into any audience, into any gathering, I have a group of people waiting to listen to me. And they wait in anticipation, waiting to be delighted, waiting to be entertained, waiting to be ignited in some way or the other. And yet, there is that only one moment when they can come together in that shared storied experience. No matter what I do, no matter what I can do, these people will go back to their lives. We have lives that we lead with ourselves in our private space, lives that we share with our family, lives that we share with our friends, lives that we share with our colleagues at work. So there are so many personas inside each one of us. And is there a way that you are the same person at every place? Perhaps not. But what stories can do is to create this shared experience, recreate this shared experience, no matter where you are. Enjoy this podcast, enjoy the story. Just listen to it with a friend, or even if you've heard it before, go ahead and share this story with a friend in any context that you see it fit in, and have a conversation with that friend. And there you can recreate a shared experience. You can recreate a storied experience with another human being. I'm also someone who believes that stories, as they bring people together, these opportunities to come together will have to be willfully created. Well, there is the Netflix and the OTT and the cinema and the travel and the work and the deadlines and the pressures of life, which is leading us to lead singular lives, each one on a singular pursuit, a pursuit for success, a pursuit for happiness, and a pursuit to be the best version of who we are. But if a story can bring an entire family together at the dinner table, somebody just plays this out or tells the story and has a conversation with everyone at home, or a water cooler conversation with a bunch of friends, where you can share this story with your peers, with your colleagues, and get an insight into their mind, into how do they look at a situation. I'm hoping that these stories will travel through this podcast, and they will live through your heart and your mind, and you will find opportunities to share them with the people around you. Now, what are those opportunities? I think you will discover as we go along. Well, enough of a preamble to the second episode. I don't want it to be a Gyan Devta kind of a session, but I do want to be able to dive into the story right away. So, thank you once again to all those people who messaged me and who DM'd me and said the story is great and they want to listen to some more Chem stories. Now, that's where you break my calendar because you asked for it. Now you are going to get it. Um, Okay, so this one is another Chem story. Remember, Chem is a fictional city in the Jewish oral tradition, in the Jewish tradition of stories, and it's a city where people are known for their stupidity. They are really foolish, and they keep making those mistakes, and they live with those mistakes, or they bear the consequences of those mistakes, or the stupidity that they have in them. So here is another classic story of from Chem, and this one is called In the Pits. Now, once in Kem, the people of the city decided to build a large synagogue, a larger synagogue, one of the greatest that they had ever seen. And so, some of the people in the city of Kem got together to build this synagogue for the city. The workers got into action. They took their spades and their tools and they dug and they dug and they dug and they dug deeper. They dug deeper and they dug deeper and threw out a huge mound of earth. Now, the men had been digging for a day, a week, and a month, and they had dug a large pit. And they looked at each other and they wondered, well, we do have a large mound of earth. What are we going to do with this? The bunch of people who had been watching these men at work from the sides, they came forward and said, well, there is a good way to dispose of this earth. Let's use it some way. Maybe we can build another pit and fill that up with this earth. Everyone cheered and said, whoa, this is a good idea. Why didn't we ever think of it? How foolish we are. Till somebody said, wait a minute. If you're going to dig another pit to fit all of this earth into it, what are you going to do with the earth that you're going to dig out from the second pit? Now, the people looked worried. The plan wasn't foolproof. So they looked at each other and they thought some more till somebody said, well, it's so easy. You dig a larger pit which can take all this earth. You scoop out double the earth and fill this up. The people cheered and said, woohoo, finally, we have a solution. And so they went back to their digging. What do you think happened to the pit? What do you think happened to this mound of earth that they dug out every single time and the one that refused to go away? So while I love this story, I think the whole metaphor of digging a pit for oneself, I think, kept coming back to me. We dig a pit and then we wonder what are we going to do with it, and we fall into our own trap, something that we've created, a situation that we have miscalculated, something that we didn't plan for, and we become a victim of our own circumstances. And sometimes we in order to get out of that circumstance, we create another larger, deeper trouble, and our cycle of misfortunes continue. Now, I can think of this story as a good conversation with children, of how they of how a simple act uh, doesn't really complete a good picture, or something which leads to larger problems. A little habit which doesn't really become a good habit, but a habit which actually leads to further delays. I can think of it as a story that can trigger conversations within a household of responsibilities and duties between people. How does everyone fit in? What solutions do they have to each other's problems? I can think of this story as a trigger within an organization that is creating a business strategy somewhere where, to solve a business problem, you create a bigger problem without thinking of the consequences. Well, if you look at it this way, the story can really fit into many different conversations, into many different situations in our lives where we keep falling out and in of a problem by not really contemplating what are the consequences of the solution that we have in mind. Will this lead to better solution finding? I don't know. So go ahead and tell the story to someone. I hope this story triggers conversations between people, because that's what this podcast and its stories are meant to do. And always remember, you can come back and tell me, what did the story lead to? What conversations did you have and with who? Because if you tell me these stories are working, I know they will work for everyone else. Before I sign off, just a reminder, I've just gotten back to podcasting, so please be kind with me. It's a new format, a new flavor, a new intent. Play it out in your car, share it with your colleague, share it with a friend, share it with your family. Every click, every play helps me put the next episode in place. Thank you for listening. Golpo Stories from Around the World is a podcast of stories that spark conversations. You will find a bunch of traditional tales in here, retold and bridged with the world that we live in today. A story grows only when it is told, so go ahead and share these stories in the classroom, in the boardroom, or in your living room. And come back to me and tell me, what did everyone say? If you like my stories and want to support this podcast, then you may want to gift a story, a little contribution to make storytelling sustainable for you, me, and others. To know more about my work, you can look up www.yourstorybag.com. I have a weekly newsletter. Follow the sound of my stories with the hashtag storytelling with Rituparna. You can connect with me on social media. The links are in the show notes below. Until the next story, happy storytelling.